I just finished producing 30 songs in 30 days, and I learned a ton about music production. Even though I've been producing music for over a decade, the challenge reminded me of some techniques that I kind of forgot about. And it also showed me some new ones that are absolutely essential for good sounding tracks. In this video, I'm going to show you 9 of those techniques so that you can use them in your own songs. By the way, if you want to watch the full journey of producing 30 songs in 30 days and some of the challenges I went through, I would highly recommend watching the full video. Technique number 1 involves mastering, specifically mastering to -7.7 LUFS. Let me explain why. When producing multiple songs a part of the same album, or that you want to sound like they're cohesive, you want them to be mastered somewhat similarly. The biggest thing being that they're a similar loudness level. You can see here, even just visually looking at the waveforms, that they are all pretty similar. As I was doing some research into boosting my song as loud as it could go, I found some research on the best of the best dance tracks, specifically David Guetta mastering a lot of his tracks to 7.7. And because David Guetta was using -7.7 as the club standard, I figured that that would be a perfect standard for a lot of the songs I make. Not all of my songs are in the dance genre, but mixing them all to the same LUFS will mean that when a listener changes songs, they're not bombarded with volume changes. 7.7 is also a good number for being competitively loud. But of course, it depends on your genre. The second thing I learned was that to make a fast song requires knowing your sample library. The better you know your sample library and the better you have things prepped, it's gonna make things a bunch easier creatively. Easiest thing to prep, and maybe the most important thing to prep, are your drum sample. For most of the songs I made during this challenge, I used programmed drums. For that reason, almost every night I would create a new drum machine designer in Logic, or in other words, just a collection of samples that you can see that are in the realm of what I would use. But that meant when I was actually ready to produce my song, I didn't have to think about choosing every drum sample because I'd already done it before. This sped up my workflow significantly. And what's cool is anytime I want to make a song in the future, I have all of these drum options here that I can choose from. The same is true of presets for your synths, of bass sounds, of vocal presets. If you're making the same type of music, it makes a lot of sense to use the same types of sounds. And if you can make them into a preset or pre-save something, you're going to save a ton of time. Speaking of a fast way to save some time, you should check out my vocal preset pack, Vocal Magic 1. It only uses stock plugins and it will automatically transform your voice into something that sounds more professional. On to technique number 3 that I learned during this challenge, and that is to use limiting and dynamic control on your buses before going into the master limiter. That probably sounds like a bunch of jargon for people that are just beginning, but let me explain. You can think of buses like folders. Group like instruments together to be able to affect them all the same way. This lets you mix a song much faster. You can also use these folders to apply group processing like limiting and distortion. Let's take a look at this example on the drum bus. When you apply group processing like saturation, all of the elements interplay with one another. Point number 4. Vocals are one of the hardest and most time-consuming things to get right, but they're also the most important. Getting a good vocal is less about singing the right notes and more about nailing the emotions of a song. There was one thing in this challenge I wish I had more time for. It would be to work on the vocals. Take a listen to this vocal line that I had. You can hear that there's some emotion in it, but it's still lacking. There's a couple notes that are just not quite right that I would love to fix.
No, we don't need the desert sunshine to make it out.
Technique number 5 that I discovered during this challenge was that a slightly delayed bass equals a bigger low end. The bass or the low end of a song is very important. And one of the better ways that you can do to help blend the kick and the bass together is to simply delay the bass. It makes sense to let the kick take that first transient spike and then have the bass come in and fill in the sustain of the kick. It's almost as if they're one instrument, and you can think of them like that. This is the reason that sidechaining sounds so good. In this example here, we don't need to sidechain because the groove of the bass is coming in between the kick. Check it out. Let's Let's find a different scenario where the bass and the kick happen at the same time.
I don't wanna get back, hoping that we both care. But the reason that I left, kinda hard to
In this example, you could hear that there's a very heavily sustained bass. In this case, an 808. I'm treating that low end as one single instrument, and you can do that with side chaining, with strategic placement of the bass as well. But the more that they're cohesive, the better the low end's gonna sound and the better your track's gonna sound. Let's get into technique number 6. If this video is helping you out to make some sweet, sweet music, hit the like button. That will help show some other producers the good word and help me out. So thanks. The next tip I had is to automate your reverb or really anything for transitions. Transitions are extremely important as you're going from part to part. And especially if you're building your song from scratch or using a lot of loops, it can sound really robotic going from one part to another part. And the less that it can sound robotic, the better. Those synths kind of faded out and I added some reverb and some delay to the end of them so that they transition better into that verse. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Those reverb tails help to connect the two together. Tip number 7 is to visually check your low end with a spectrum analyzer. I have a fairly decent home studio setup here and I have an expensive pair of studio headphones, but I still don't have the capacity to hear the low end sub as much as I should. Anything below like 70, 60 hertz is hard for me to hear. It's still important in the song, but oftentimes when I'm mixing, it can get way out of whack without me realizing. This is true for a lot of home studio producers. The best alternative is to use frequency analyzers to see where it sits. My favorite to do so is called Span. It is a free one. Check it out. Typically, I'm looking for the spectrum analyzer to be about even. The low end should be about the same as the high end. In this case, I'm going for a bit warmer of a mix. I'm going for a bit different genre than I might a balanced mix. I'm going for a sub-heavy mix, which is why you can see that this sub is going high right here. But you can also see that at the end here, when I bring up the synths at the end, it's going to become more balanced. You can use this as a visual reminder of what you need to change. Technique number 8 that I learned. Your instrumental arrangement is way more important than mixing. This is something I wish I realized like 6-7 years ago, but you can't fix a bad arrangement with a better mix. It just doesn't work like that. The best mixes are already of songs that are arranged brilliantly. When I say arrangement, that refers to a few things. 1, the flow of the song from the verse to the pre-chorus to the chorus. And 2, almost more importantly, the actual parts that each instrument is playing. It's going to be very much easier to mix something if you have a piano part playing a high note and a bass part playing a low note than if you are playing the same notes in the piano and the bass. You'll be able to hear them better because they're occupying different parts of the frequency spectrum. There were multiple times throughout this challenge that I would just spend hours trying different sounds to see which one vibed the best, trying different drum beats, trying different bass lines to see which one actually fit the song. Rather than trying to fix something in the mix stage, spend more time nailing the parts down so that they all sound good before mixing, so that when you do actually mix, it's going to sound even better. And my final tip after learning this, tip number 9, is that simple is better. You don't often need a lot of things to make an idea come through. The more things that you can strip away from an idea and still have it there, the better. Check out how simple this pre-chorus is.
If the sun's not shining just the way
It's
you
literally
like
just
it,
drums and a nice melody with a good flow.
All you need is a friend and a little bit of guidance to turn the day
Back into the
around
chorus.
and start smiling. 'Cause I've got you, you got me, and if you're blue, we'll make it green.
If you find yourself having to add a bunch of different things, chances are your song probably isn't that good to start. If you like this video, I think you'll enjoy watching my full 30 days in producing. I go over some other lessons and you can watch it right up there.